Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Campaign finance reports are one of those things that get talked about a lot during campaigns, but they're not always easy to interpret. They can tell us a great deal about a campaign, but they can also have limits, and that's exactly what we're here to explore today. I'm grateful to each of our panelists for taking the time to share their experience and perspective. All three of our panelists have a long history in South Dakota politics, so let's start with introductions. First, we have Steve Jarding, who is internationally recognized expert on campaigns and the electoral process, and he is joining us from Romania today, where he is working to help establish democracy in the formerly communist country. A native of Mitchell and current resident of Rapid City, Steve is a former head of the South Dakota Democratic Party. He has advised and or chaired many U.S. Senate campaigns, as well as statewide races in rural states, and has served on the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. Next up, we have Steve Hildebrand, a Sioux Falls resident and CEO of the South Dakota nonprofit Promising Futures Fund. He has served as the Deputy National Campaign Manager for Barack Obama's 2008 campaign and managed major South Dakota Senate campaigns for Tim Johnson and Tom Daschle. Lastly, we have Drey Samuelson, a Nebraska native and current resident of Sioux Falls who is currently working or who has worked with the Dan Osborne for U.S. Senate campaign recently here in Nebraska. He has served as chief of staff to former South Dakota Senator Tim Johnson for a long time, and which gives him extensive experience with Senate politics, federal campaigns, and the state's political environment. Okay, everyone, if you're ready, I have our first question here. Money does not determine every election, but it reveals what a campaign can build, sustain, and communicate. What is the first thing each of you notices in these reports? Drey, we could start with.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
My reaction was, neither one of these guys has raised enough money to as much money as they would like, that's for sure. But I would say that Brian has raised a lot more than Julian, which is obvious. And I think that's a concern. You can't win without money. That's a given. And but as Ngoc said, it's not determinative of who always wins. When Tim Johnson took on Larry Pressler, we were outspent 2-1 and we still won. So you can win with less money, but you can't win with very little money. And I think that Julian has got a long ways to go to raise enough money to even be to run a competitive race for the U.S. Senate. I think Brian has done a better job. He's got he's got a national group of people that are supporting him, and of the $228,000 that Julian has raised, $50,000 of that is in-kind contributions. So in actual dollars, Julian has raised only $178,000 over the last 18 months. So I think that both of them have to raise more, but I think Julian needs to raise a lot more.
Thank you, Drey. Steve, do you have any thoughts here?
The one way I look at it is when you combine the resources of both candidates and the limited base of voters that even know who they are. Certainly having both candidates in this race is not going to be helpful to beating Mike Rounds. As Drey said, money's not everything, but if you're a candidate with limited exposure to the voters of South Dakota and you have no money, then you're in a world of hurt. The way a Democrat or an independent can win this race is if we can get enough Democrats, independents, and potentially moderate Republicans to build a coalition to beat Mike Rounds. If we're going to split the vote amongst an independent and a Democrat, there's no chance of winning whatsoever. And so that's just really an important thing for those two candidates to figure out. In the environment we're in right now, hold on one second. In the environment we're in right now, having a liberal Democrat win in South Dakota is highly unlikely. And as much as I like Julian, and we've been friends for a very long time, I have tremendous respect for him. He's not going to win this race, especially if we're dividing progressive votes amongst an independent and a Democrat. So almost regardless of money, dividing the vote amongst the two is not a good thing. If they are dwarfed in spending, it's just going to be even that much worse. So I hesitate to say this, but if these two don't consolidate a vote and resources, we're going to be absolutely nowhere in defeating Mike Rounds.
Thank you so much for that, Steve. Mr. Jarding, anything to add?
Well, no, I mean, I tend to agree. I mean, politics is, it's a bottom line business. I can't serve if I don't have title. And if we split our vote, we're not going to get title. So one way or another, we have to figure that out. I don't disagree. Money is never, in a weird sort of way, bothered me in the sense that, I mean, Mike Rounds going to have all the money in the world. I don't need to have more amounts. I need to have enough to win. And that can be very different. Mike Rounds could have $100 million, but if I only need $4 million to reach enough voters to win, then I'll take the $4 million. I mean, if I could get to $100 million, I'd take it. But sometimes we lose sight of, well, Rounds has all the money and all the infrastructure and all the national folks behind him. Yeah, whatever. But by the way, if I'm a Democrat on the ballot and you could pick a year, I'd pick this one, or an independent on the ballot, and I'd pick this one. So that'll neutralize a whole lot of money. So I don't disagree. I don't see how you can defeat Mike Rounds when the limited pool of voting that either a Democrat or independent has is divided. So we have to figure out how to make that work. It hurts me to say the Democratic brand in South Dakota is not good right now, and it's been a long time coming. It's been I think Democrats in South Dakota, because they don't have the numbers or the money, they've been easily branded as something they're not. They've been branded as out of touch, too liberal, too national, too whatever. And the fact is, it's the non-Republican Party, whether it's independent or Democrat in South Dakota, that has been fighting for farmers, been fighting for working class people, been fighting for teachers, been fighting for wages, been fighting for all the things that, by the way, South Dakota needs. I mean, if whether, and I agree, we need to consolidate.
Oh no.
To Medicaid in South Dakota, 56% of all the people in nursing homes and retirement care are paid by Medicaid. Over half of the babies born in South Dakota are paid by Medicaid. You take the $250 billion cuts to SNAP program, that's money out of farmers' pockets. That big, ugly bill is destroying South Dakota. Not to mention the cuts to the Department of Education. South Dakota receives more Department of Education money than any state in the union. At 21% of South Dakota's education budget comes from the Department of Education. So now we have the worst teacher pay, and we're going to take 21% out of the pockets of teachers that are going to equipment and supplies. Boy, if there's a year that I want to run and say, Mike Rounds, let's have at it, big boy. You supported that, didn't say a damn thing. And if the Democrats can consolidate, and again, in this case, with an independent, however that washes out, let's bring it on. Let's have this battle, no matter how much money Mike Rounds has. So I think in both Steve and Drey have.
Just so we can keep the conversation going and respect everyone's time. So the first segment here, I would like to dive a little bit deeper into reading financial health so that our audience can learn a little bit more about how you're assessing these reports and what you're taking out of them. Steve, before we move on to the next section here, would you like to finish your thought at all?
Well, no, I don't know how much you had before I cut out. It's real simple. If we don't consolidate, we can't win.
Thank you.
If we consolidate, the issues are working heavily. We could make this interesting if we can consolidate, because I think there'll be enough money there.
Thank you, Steve. One thing that might help with your bandwidth here is turning off your camera, and then that way we can hear and rely on your audio better. Perfect. Thank you, Steve. Okay, so our first section here, which figures best reveal whether a campaign is healthy, total raised, cash on hand, donor composition, burn rate, debt, or anything else? And whoever would like to start.
I mean, I would say with 100 or so days left in a campaign, cash on hand is going to be absolutely the most important. It doesn't matter how much you've raised if you don't have anything to spend in the final days when voters are hoping to start paying attention. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think that Julian even stands a chance of getting 5 or 10% of the vote if he has zero money to communicate with. I mean, what I would say about both Brian and Julian is that even informed Democrats who I'll intersect with throughout the course of a day and a week, they can't even remember the names of those two candidates. They can remember Mike Rounds, but for the people that they would consider voting for, they can't even remember the candidates' names. That says a lot about, you know, these two candidates who have been in this race for about a year. There's low name ID. There's even lower name recognition. You know, when you say Julian Bedoin as a response to their question, they're like, oh yeah, I like him. Well, that's great, but you can't even remember his name. And that says a lot about where these candidates are. In both of their cases, they've been a great disappointment to me in that they've done little to create any kind of buzz about their campaigns, about their candidacies. They've done very little to go after Mike Rounds in any way that's been noticed. They've done very little when it comes to traction on social media. They've done very little to get any kind of press attention. And if one or both of them don't change that very soon, it's hardly going to matter how much money they have. But when you have, I mean, honestly, like to be in a position with anything less than even a million or 2 million at this point, these races are expensive, even in a state like South Dakota. And you're going up against, Mike Rounds hasn't raised as much as he probably should for the level of incumbency that he has. But he still has more than enough to communicate and win an election. So these guys need to get their act together and either decide that they want to be a United States Senator or not. And if they really don't, if they just want to finish this race, they're going to finish with embarrassing levels if they don't change their campaign in a big way.
I appreciate that, Steve. And real quick for the audience here too, for cash on hand, Rounds' campaign has $2,700,000, some change. Bangs has $51,400. Julian has $3,778. Julian's campaign is the only one with debt, and that amount is $14,458. Any other thoughts to add to this question, or does everyone agree that cash on hand is the most important indicator at this point?
So I'm I'm having just as Jarding, I'm having a little trouble with my computer here, but so I only heard a little bit of what Stephen said. But I did hear him say that cash on hand is the most important, and I absolutely agree with that. I mean, I don't think there's any question that if the only thing really to talk about, in my opinion, is whether or not they're going to consolidate, because they have to. This is they're wasting their time, and we're wasting our time talking about it if they don't. Because they have to. It's just this is a really hard race, even if they do consolidate, but it's not an impossible race if they consolidate, because we don't know the size of the blue wave that's coming. But if they don't, this is, and frankly, just to put it bluntly, an exercise in futility.
Thank you for that, Drey. I think Steve is popping off here again, and he might come back to us, hopefully. For the audience, he is dealing with a thunderstorm at the moment, so we will continue the conversation here. Is Banks' spending level evidence of an appropriately aggressive campaign, or is $51,000 too little cash for this stage? I know Steve said he needs at least $1 million.
Yeah, it's far too little for sure. And I think, I think he's run a he's got national donors, and that helps. That's why one of the reasons, probably the main reason, that he's raised more money. But he's also been on TV. He's run advertising. He's had 4 polls. And if Julian is doing any of that, I'm not aware of it. I don't think he is. And to win, you have to do campaign activities. Brian has done some, and Julian, as far as I know, hasn't done. I mean, I've seen him on Facebook a little bit, but you're not gonna win on Facebook ads alone. That's for sure.
Steve, how serious is Vote One's combination of $3,000 in cash and $14,000, almost $500 in obligations?
I mean, if I were Julian, I'd shut down my campaign and call it good. At this point, donors are going to be highly reluctant to even give him money because he has not proven his candidacy as significant. If you're a progressive voter in the United States, you're not just looking at a race in your state. You're looking at, when you're looking at Senate and congressional races, what you're looking at is, how do we win the majority of the House? How do we win the majority of the Senate? And if you're a donor like me and you're putting only a certain amount of money around to races, like so far I haven't invested in the South Dakota U.S. Senate race because I don't see it as one that's going to put us over the majority. I'm looking at Maine and Texas and North Carolina and other states that could get us the majority in the Senate, and got to take a look at a limited number of House races as well. So if I were Julian, you have no money on hand. If all you could come up with was a $5,000 cash on hand figure before you filed your report, my bet is you haven't raised any money since because you're not proving yourself. So why not cut the losses before you've created a significant amount of debt for you that's going to be very difficult to ever get paid off?
Yeah.
Now,
I'd like to echo that, because I can tell you this: it's very difficult to raise money after you've lost, and if you lose big, it's even harder. I've seen candidates go into these races and spend more than they have, and then they're stuck with a $200,000 bill, and it's really, really hard to raise money after, because you're going back to the same people that already gave you money, and they're disappointed that you lost, and you're just really difficult to do it. So I think that's something that Julian has to keep in mind, because it is really hard to pay off campaign debt.
It's a great perspective. Thank you. Mr. Jarding, I see you're back here with us. Please just know that you're muted right now, but I'll move on to the next question here if you have anything to respond with. Bangs has received approximately 99% of his contributions from individuals, and roughly 61% of his individual giving is unitemized. What does that tell you about the operation? Andre, you feel free to start.
Well, I mean, he's got a long ways to go, is what it tells me. I mean, I don't know how to say it other than that. It's you know, his campaign is not fired like he hoped that it would, I'm sure. And at some point, you just have to realize that it's not firing. We're within, you know, 3.5 months of the campaign here, and if it hasn't taken off by now, yeah, it's not going to take off in all likelihood, as Steve said. So it's not good news for him for sure.
Well, maybe I'm framing this in an awkward way, but approximately 99% of his contributions are coming from individuals, and roughly 61% of those individual giving is unitemized, and that really just means less than $200. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so seeing a large swath of small donors, does that give you
Sure.
optimism or
Yeah.
pause?
Well, that's good. Obviously, you want to have as many small donors as possible, and that shows something.
Yeah.
But it doesn't move the ball very far down the road if you don't have much money. So I think that you can look at the numbers and say, well, he's done real well with individuals,
Mhm.
but if that doesn't add up to anything, then it doesn't mean anything either.
Steve, did you have something to add to this as well?
You know, it's a good number of small donors, but he should be resoliciting the hell out of them,
Mhm.
so that it adds up to something. I mean, his cash on hand is so low that his spending is just way too high. And again, 100 days left. You don't have cash on hand to spend when voters are making their decisions. You're in a world of hurt. So either figure out how to get it ramped up in a dramatic way, or
You can hear
why
me if I'm
bother?
back. Okay.
Yeah, fantastic. You sound great, Steve. Do you have anything to add to this?
Well, I mean, with respect, I mean, even if our Democratic candidate could go back to all these small donors and get them to contribute, it's not going to add up to anything. I mean, part of the problem, the reason the Democrats can't raise money is the Democratic brand. I hate to say it. I'm a former executive director of the party. Steve is. Drey's devoted his life to Democratic politics. But the Democratic brand in South Dakota, I'm sorry, is dead. If we need to rebrand, and if that means rebranding and we become the Independent Democratic Party and it's Brian is ahead, if we don't get that right, we're not going to raise any money anyway. Because the Democrats have not been able to raise money at this level, whether it's governor or senator. I mean, we're the People's Republic of South Dakota. We have the largest supermajority of Republicans in the legislature of any state in the union. We're the last state in the union selected a governor from a different party. In this case, Republicans will go over 50 years. I hate to say it, but fine. If we need to rebrand, we need to rebrand. I think we could win with an independent candidate. I don't think, and I hate to say it, I don't think we can win with a Democratic nominee because the brand needs to be fixed. And so, yes, we can talk about consolidation. Yes, we can talk about they need to go get a bunch of.
I think you might have cut out here again, Steve, but you're really on the heat right now, so I didn't want to interrupt that at all. But we were speaking about Bangs's donor composition and having a majority of percentage of individuals who are unitemized, meaning smaller donors or smaller donation amounts. I'll move on to the next question here. And since we are talking about the Democratic Party a little bit, I do want to get down to the subject of the South Dakota Democratic Party here. These reports suggest that Baudouin has received little direct financial support from national or state Democratic organizations, while Bangs has raised nearly twice the amount he raised as a Democratic nominee in 2022. From your experience, what is reasonable for a Democratic Senate candidate in South Dakota to expect from the state party or the national party? And when does a campaign earn that support? And when is it largely on its own? Steve, 0.
I mean, again, this is about winning the majority of the U.S. House or U.S. Senate. And unless there becomes a real campaign in South Dakota that can compete with Mike Rounds, national Democrats aren't going to spend a dime. South Dakota Democrats don't have any money to spend. There is no real fundraising apparatus. Legislative candidates will probably get 0 to little support from the party. And those could be candidates that would actually be viable to win a legislative seat. So the national Democrats are going to hedge their bets and say, not a chance in South Dakota. They've got too many other races in play around the country that they have to invest very, very heavily in and should. And in South Dakota, the party has no resources to put behind either the Senate race or the governor's race.
Well, and if I could add, I mean, let's be honest. I spent 4 years at the Senate committee. I don't think it's changed much. You either have to show you got a bunch of money, or you got to show a poll that you're within striking distance. We're never going to show we have a lot of money. So you got to find a poll. We're not going to raise money from national races. We're not going to. There's no money, as Steve said, in the South Dakota party. So if we could say, I'm running as an independent, I can beat Mike Rounds. I need national money. National donors, they don't give a damn where they give the money. They want to help buy Senate seats. And so my appeal isn't to the national party. They're not going to give. State party has no money. I'm going to independents saying I could, or at least to groups to say, support an independent candidate, and I can beat Mike Rounds. Let's be honest. The poll that Bangs has, Mike Rounds has a 43% or 39%, excuse me, 43% positive, 39%. It's laid a glove on him. It reminds me of the race when Jim Webb beat George Allen. Those numbers were identical. Allen's negatives were too high, and that's why we convinced Webb to get into the race, because we thought there was a chance, and he ends up beating him. I look at this and I say, Mike Rounds is vulnerable. Bangs, you could beat this guy. You got to make your case nationally. All you national donors, take a look at this one. Don't write it off. Because Rounds is in trouble, and he's got the big ugly bill, and I'm gonna hang that around him, and he's gonna be in big trouble. If you can make that case, maybe you can get enough money to at least skirt in. I mean, when Jim Webb won the primary, we were in debt. We had to convince our landlord money. But we just won a primary, and all of a sudden the money came, and I think Bangs is in a similar situation. Just keep your powder dry and keep a look at me, because Rounds is vulnerable. His negatives are too high, and no one's laid a glove on him. Again, but do it nationally with big donors, because you're not going to get a damn thing from either one of the parties. One has no money, and one doesn't give a damn unless you got a poll that shows you're close.
Well, that's true. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I do remember from seeing the PPP poll that Brian was only 4% behind Rounds, and Julian was 25% behind Rounds. And PPP is a really good polling company. They're affordable and they're accurate. So I think that's Mike. Rounds is a real vulnerability, as Steve said, and with a 4% negative or behind Rounds, I just think Brian could win this race if there's a blue wave, and it also gives him the chance to raise some money. I've just come from the Osborne campaign, and nobody gave him a chance when he ran 3 years ago. But because he's an independent, it made it easier for Republicans to vote for him and for independents to vote for him too. The other thing I was going to say about the Democratic Party is I saw a poll that was done, I don't know, maybe 8 months ago, and it was testing Dusty Johnson against Billy Sutton. And there was 2 different polls. One was Billy Sutton running as an independent, and one was Billy Sutton running as a Democrat. In the one that had Billy Sutton running as a Democrat, Billy was behind by 4%. In the one that Billy was running as an independent, he was ahead of Dusty Johnson by 7%. So there's an 11% difference, at least in those 2 polls, between running as an independent and running as a Democrat. So, I mean, I'm not saying that's the way that it should be, but we have to live in the real world. And the real world is right now, as Jarding said, the Democratic brand is not what it should be or what we would want it to be. So if there's an 11% penalty you pay for being a Democrat, we should try and figure out a way to run independents. Frankly, I'm not wedded to the Democratic Party. What I am wedded to is good policy that takes care of vulnerable people, and that's all that matters to me. I mean, the Democratic Party stands for helping vulnerable people, but independents can support policies that help vulnerable people too. And if that's what we have to do. And in order to win these races, then that's what we, in fact, should do.
Thank you all. I do want to briefly mention here that people have been talking about the poll that came out from Mike Rounds' campaign. I've only seen that publicized by Dakota War College so far, so I haven't been able to really look into it. But it does show Bangs in 3rd place and at I believe 16% or something like that, and Beaudoin in 2nd place at 19%. Very, very different than Banks's polling, of course. And
by the way,
go ahead. Yes, Steve.
Not the Democrat. So I want to belittle him as much as I can, and my guess is that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about money versus organizing here. Can a state campaign substitute town halls, personal contact, volunteers, and earned media for paid communication?
No, not on the Democratic side. It's just not there. I mean, we should be running a national campaign.
I think a lot of people would argue that Beaudoin has been starting the grassroots movement and meeting people wherever they're at. He's done 28 town halls, and the Democrats have done a good job of promoting and branding those efforts.
Yeah, but I would say that
I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying that isn't going to win this race.
I understand. I agree with you.
28 town halls, and Democrats, knowledgeable Democrats, still can't remember who's running. I mean, that's a real problem. You say grassroots movement. I say he's been in the grassroots a little bit, but there's no movement.
I appreciate
there
that.
literally is no movement for any candidate of the 3.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Steve.
I agree.
No, I mean, this is a national campaign. We're not going to win in South Dakota. We're going to win nationally.
I understand. You're talking about Banks's campaign and fundraising?
I am. I mean, and again, I don't mean that pejoratively to South Dakota. It's just there's not enough Democrats in South Dakota. There's not enough money in South Dakota. Rick Weiland went to every town. Well, like I said, to me, it's real simple. Bangs goes nationally. They do need to consolidate, but Bangs says, listen, Rounds is vulnerable. I'm running as an independent. This is a good year for independents. Take a look at me. Look at my profile. It's a really good profile.
At what point must field activity begin producing measurable fundraising returns? I have a feeling you guys would all say a long time ago, but there has been a lot of activity that I do see from both campaigns here in South Dakota. Brian Bangs has recently just in the last couple of days announced he has visited every county in the state of South Dakota. Julian, of course, has been doing these town halls with Nikki. But at what point do those need to show up either in FEC reports or any other indicators of their productivity?
So I would look at it from a total campaign perspective. What did you say and do at your town hall that you can post on social media that's going to drive people to give you money? And so like all these town halls are fine and dandy. I'm Facebook friends with Julian and with Brian, and I've never seen almost anything on Facebook that triggers something of fascination from what Julian has said at a town hall that's going to drive me to say, I want to contribute. You know, you got to show repetition, passion, fierceness. You got to show a clear difference between you and Mike Rounds. And like none of that is coming through in this discussion. So I don't even know why he's in this Senate race. He needs to get out. He needs to back Brian. Brian needs to get off his ass and become a very fierce candidate against Mike Rounds, or everybody's wasting their time.
I can't disagree with a word of that. I mean, that's exactly how I see it. I think, you know, if this wasn't a two-person race, if Brian had, if Julian had never gotten into the race and Brian was running. Well, let me just finish what I was saying. I think that if Julian had never been in the race and Brian had an unencumbered race against Rounds right from the start, which is what Dan Osborne had last time in Nebraska against Doug Fisher, that made a huge difference.
But Drey, please continue if we can.
Well, that was just it. I mean, I think if this was a one-on-one race, like Dan Osborne had in Nebraska, if this was Brian versus Mike Rounds, this would be a different race. I mean, as I think we all agree, Rounds is vulnerable, and if Brian was on a one-on-one race, he would have raised quite a bit more money, I believe. And if he's behind by only 4 points, which is what the PPP poll showed, who knows where he'd be if he had more money for advertising and he didn't, and he was seen as much more of a viable candidate. But that's not where we are. Where we are is where we are. And so I think these two guys have to figure out what they're going to do, because they're playing chicken with each other, and one of them is going to have to turn away or they're both going to crash and burn. That's the way I look at it.
I hadn't heard that perspective yet, Steve, but that's making a lot of sense to me. You're saying that there's basically no money in South Dakota to raise as a Democrat or independent, and that you do have to go national to actually fundraise and run a competitive campaign.
But here's the other piece I would add. There is no time left.
Yeah.
Julian needs to make a decision now to get out. If you haven't raised money up through this point in the campaign, welcome to August, where people check out in a big way politically, and it's only going to get worse. And if by September 1st you haven't proven yourself, you are done. There is no reason to be in. Conversely, the only way Brian's going to get any traction, and Drey and Jarding have said the same thing, is if it's a one-person candidate. So if Julian doesn't get out in the next few days, Brian's candidacy only gets harder and harder and harder. So these two need to be mature adults and hammer this out. Running for the United States Senate is one thing of a million great things you could do in this country. If you're not doing that well, go do something else great.
Yes. I agree with that 1,000%. That's exactly right. This is not the only thing that people can do to aid democracy in this country. And in fact, both of them staying in is hurting democracy to the extent that it matters right now. And one of them needs to leave. And I think the one that needs to leave clearly is Julian. And I hope he does. I think I can't agree with Stephen more enthusiastically.
Well, and even the point I would make, let's not wait till Labor Day. I mean, it's not going to change. You got $5,000 in the bank and he's got $3 million. You're going to raise what, $2.5 million in the next 35 days? It's going to happen. It's a national race. The Democratic Party brand in South Dakota is dead. I apologize to say it, hurts me to say it. It just is. So we either nationalize this race and say we got an independent that can beat a flawed Mike Rounds, or let's go home. But I just don't see hope for the Democratic candidate. I wish I could, but we don't. It's the reality. We could, like I say, we could wait till Labor Day. It's not, what's going to happen? Is it going to have $10,000 in the bank to $3 million? I mean, it's silly. Get out. Thank God it's nationalized if you're Brian Banks, because that's where the money is. It's not in South Dakota. Go get national money. Say, I'm running as an independent. Independents are looking awfully good all of a sudden in America these days. Mike Rounds has vulnerable polling numbers. I'm going to go kick his ass, but you got to write me a check. And that check is not coming with a South Dakota area code or a zip code on it. It's just not happening.
The one thing that's important to remember is that Julian only has until, I think it's August 4th to withdraw his name.
That's the ballot deadline. You're correct.
So he's got to decide to do that if he's going to before then.
Well, and by the way, to put a point on it, if Julian gets out, it doesn't mean you're a bad Democrat. It means, to Drey's point, in democracy, we got to win. We got to beat these guys. And if my brand isn't working right now, but there potentially is a brand that can win, as someone that believes in democracy, Democrats, I have to have title to change society. And right now, the Democratic brand in South Dakota is better figure out one that can, because Mike Rounds has vulnerability.
That's right.
Here's the only difference I would add. Democratic activists in South Dakota, and there's still plenty of us who are willing to write checks, are as hungry as I've ever seen them. They want relevance again. They want a voice again. They want to be a part of this game again. And people are willing to write checks. And it might not add up to $1 million, but I think you could get to 250 to 300,000 in South Dakota if you would light us on fire. If you're going to do nothing and be a lethargic candidate, we're not wasting our money on you.
Right.
If you light us on fire and show us a progressive brand that can beat Mike Rounds, we'll write you checks.
Yep, I agree with that.
You know, we can focus more. We have about 12 minutes, 15 minutes left here. And I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. I know we've had a lot of delays, but we can focus more on the advice to each campaign, or we can talk a little bit more about the Democratic brand in South Dakota and what that might look like for the next few cycles. I myself am very curious about your thoughts on, is there an independent resurgence, or in our region specifically, are we seeing more independent candidates? Conversely, on the other end, we have a Democratic base that is very clear to say that we've never elected an independent to statewide office before, and no one knows what that looks like. So either way, do you want to focus a little bit more on the Democratic brand and wrap that up, or should we move on to closing and advice to candidates here?
I think we've said what we have to say. I think we should move towards closing.
All right.
And I think all three of us on this panel think that Julian should leave the race. And I don't know that there's that much more to say, really.
Yeah, we have a deadline coming up here, August 4th. And I see that all three of you experts are very pragmatic about this and have recommended that vote one step down, so that, and you all agree that there is no chance at all of Mike Rounds being retired if we have a three-way race with two challengers. You all agree on that?
That would be zero. That's for sure. There's no chance.
Yeah, I understand. There are a lot of people out there who, I mean, the louder people like me, who have wondered over time, is there any way whatsoever that we can have a three-candidate race and still unseat Mike Rounds? But I thank you all for your clarity today. Final questions here, and I hope that Steve comes back to us. You are hired by this, by Mike Rounds' campaign tomorrow, Drey. What is the first financial or organizational change you would recommend to the Rounds campaign?
I don't think he really needs to make any changes, to be honest. I mean, well, let me just say this. If I were Mike Rounds' campaign manager, I would go hard against Brian Banks. That's what I would do. I mean,
Yeah.
Brian is the one that could potentially beat him. Julian is not going to beat him. I'm surprised, frankly, that they haven't done that, but if I was Mike Rounds' campaign manager, that's exactly what I would do.
I see, yeah. I think I've seen a little bit of that on Dakota War College so far, is where I'm seeing Mike Rounds define his opponent a little bit more, even though recent polling that they've promoted is showing Beaudoin in second place. Steve, did you have anything to add here? If I were to ask you, you were hired by Beaudoin's campaign tomorrow, what is the first financial or organizational change you would recommend? And I
wouldn't accept the position to be hired.
Yeah.
I would tell Julian to close his campaign down and endorse Brian Bangs and do everything he can to support him.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would say to Julian, I'll go to the party and I'll take the heat for you. Don't, this isn't about you saying I'm going to leave the Democratic Party. You're doing the right thing. And if you want to give shit to somebody, give it to me. Say, I talked you out of it, and make me the bad guy. I don't want you to lose any cachet you've gained. But we just have to do the right thing. And my advice would be, Brian Bangs, don't travel anywhere in South Dakota anymore.
Don't travel anymore, reduce spending.
Reduce spending and just raise money nationally. It's the only shot. And by the way, as a South Dakotan, I'd say, not only do I forgive you, I want you to do that. Because if you're spending time and energy crisscrossing this big state and not raising or not making that Rounds is in trouble, then it's an opportunity lost.
How do you feel voters will react to that? There have been a lot of comments about people saying Brian's fundraising is coming from out of state. Even if they're smaller donations, they're still coming from out of state, and that does not mean that those people vote.
We're talking 3% of the people who are paying attention to this in South Dakota. There is no conversation happening about the U.S. Senate race. The only conversation that's happening about the governor's race is related to a primary between two awful candidates.
Mm-hmm.
There's no discussion about the Democratic candidate running for governor. So, I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. If Julian walks out of this race tomorrow, nobody's going to notice. Nobody's going to notice. Nobody's going to sit there and say, you know, he was treated unfairly. For those 2 or 3 people that do, no one's going to notice that either. So let's just move on. Let's be adults. Let's pretend like we actually care about democracy and not about a candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get over the fact that candidates' feelings don't matter.
Right. Yes, that's right. I completely agree.
They are slipping away quickly. And if we don't collectively do something to change that, this discussion is going to be just as irrelevant as any other.
Well, in every campaign I do, I look and say, is there a path to victory? If there's not, I'll tell a candidate, God love you, I hope I'm wrong, go wrong, but I'm not running your campaign because they're in the goddamn path in hell that you can win. The only path to victory in South Dakota is Mike Rounds has bad numbers. It's a great year for Democrats. Mike Rounds has horrible votes, and the only money out there is national. So shut down South Dakota, go raise national money, Brian Bangs, and beat the hell out of Rounds using his own votes, and maybe you got a shot. That's the path to victory in my mind. If you don't want to do that, then let's all go home.
Wow. Well, that was fantastic. Any final thoughts, anyone? Thank you so much for telling me the truth today. I know that our audience, I think this is such a rare opportunity for all of us to learn from you guys, and thank you for dealing with me through the technical hiccups here this morning. But I hope that we can do something like this again and maybe discuss another race or different aspects of South Dakota politics, because it's definitely time for an upgrade.